Number 10. Sync and Monet. Sync and Monet met at Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters. The two students developed feelings for one another and began dating. Monet was actually very guarded still around the other mutants when it came to her abilities. The only person she ever seemed to be comfortable around at the time was Sync. The two's romance was brief, however, ending almost as soon as it had started, as Everett Thomas passed away, using his powers to sync with Monet and take on her powers so that he could protect human students of the school that he was near from bombs that had been placed in the school by Emma's evil sister, Adrienne, which exploded. Although he was able to protect the other students, he was not able to protect himself and died from his injuries. Sync has since been resurrected and resurfaced in Dawn of X on Krakoa, where Monet also is. She helped in the mission to destroy the Mother Mold, but we have yet to see these two rekindle their high school flames since Sync's first death. Actually, I don't think we've really seen them interact yet, so see how that goes when they do. Though of course nothing will happen because nothing ever officially happens in Dawn of X, it's all subtext. It's all in the subtext. Sexy, sexy subtext. Number 9. Beast and Abigail Brand. While Abigail Brand might not be considered an X-Men, she is still a mutant, and Beast is certainly an X-Men. He's been around for a real long time with the X-Men. Abigail first confessed that she had feelings for Beast near the end of the Joss Whedon run on Astonishing X-Men, also revealing that she was a mutant as well. From there, these two would date, and Abigail has even let it slip that she would like to have children with big bouncing blue Beast. They'd have big bouncing, probably green babies. Green furry babies. Number 8. Fantomex and Psylocke. These two have always had a strange relationship because it was one that no one really expected to happen. A lot of people still enjoyed it though because Psylocke and Fantomex are both really cool, badass characters, and they're both comic book hotties. And when people are both cool, we figured that's a good enough reason to ship them sometimes, so I think that's sort of where this relationship came from. After a bit of flirting in Volume 1 of Uncanny X-Men, it was later established that these two cared deeply for one another. Psylocke even met Fantomex's mom, and later it was revealed that Weapon 13, which is kind of an AI mind that is also a part of Fantomex, was deeply in love with Psylocke. So the three agreed to become one, in a romantic sense. Weapon 13, Fantomex, and Psylocke. It's a triad thing. Fantomex is weird. He is both an AI living within him and a ship for a nervous system that are both part of him, but he's also as amazing as he is complex, so there you go. I'm sorry if I didn't explain Fantomex completely right. He is a very confusing dude. Still love him though, still excited for that giant size. Giant size Fantomex, it's gonna happen! Number 7. Kitty Pryde and Star-Lord. These two first met and worked alongside each other in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, where both the Guardians and the X-Men worked together to get a young Jean Grey back from the Shi'ar. At the end of the adventure, Star-Lord gave Kitty a holographic phone, so they could keep in touch. Ooh! Their romance began to blossom as they continued to contact one another, just to chat. Eventually, they were trying to date long distance, and when Peter was kidnapped during one of their long distance dates, Kitty showed up, all the way from Earth, to rescue him. Aww. From then on, they were officially a thing. The two continued to see one another and were even engaged for a time. Kinda like them together too. I just feel like they're both kind of free spirits, they're both cool people. Number 6. Rogue and Deadpool. In a strange but kinda sweet turn of events, these two hooked up during their time together in the Uncanny Avengers in Volume 3 of the series. The two hook up after dealing with Red Skull. It seems that both members of the team had actually had a thing for one another. Wade confesses that although he's always liked Rogue, he hasn't spoken up because he wanted to protect her, but she pushes the issue, telling him that she doesn't need protection. Love when Rogue gets sassy with people. The whole thing is actually pretty sweet though. Even though I'm a long-time fan of Gambit and Rogue being together and I heavily ship that, I really liked this little momentary hookup. Later on, Rogue would sassily tell Gambit, who complained about the whole thing and how everyone called to tell him that she kissed Deadpool when they finally got back together for a mission. They were not dating at the time, by the way. That she didn't just kiss Deadpool, she made out with him, and she even insinuated that he was a better kisser than Remy. Ooh. Number 5. Iceman and Pyro. Kind of the ultimate couple in a way. While Jean and Emma may be seen as the ultimate fire and ice, they have nothing on Pyro and Iceman. These two literally are fire and ice. They ended up together in X-Men Gold. Iceman officially came out of the closet a few years back, which later resulted in these two having a fling. I should clarify as well that this was Simon Lasker Pyro. Still, I wish we had got to see more of these two together. I also just like that one comes from the Brotherhood and the other is from Charles's team, although this was during Simon's redemption time, so he wasn't really a bad guy anymore. Originally, actually, Bobby was the one who was skeptical about letting him join the Xavier Institute, but I guess he had a change of heart because they hooked up. Number 4. All the Mutants? Okay, so hear me out. With Dawn of X being what it is and the nation of Krakoa emerging out of it, and with all of mutant kind coming together and so much vagueness surrounding who is with who right now, there seems to be a lot of evidence pointing towards the idea that Krakoa is just all about free love. No one has been explicitly tied to anyone, and yet all history is acknowledged, and so in a way it seems like almost everyone is tied to everyone. It just makes me think that there's a lot more partner swapping than ever happening on Krakoa, where no one really seems to even be fully partnered. Like everyone holds each other's hands and everybody's touching each other, and what's happening? After all, other than returning those fallen mutants that they have lost, the first law on Krakoa is to make more mutants. And I feel like they mean this in more ways than just one. That's right, people making babies on Krakoa. I said it. We haven't seen it, but I think it's happening. It's all happening off panel. I can't handle all the sexy subtext. I have so many thoughts in my brain. Number 3. Wolverine and Cyclops. Okay, so while this has never been confirmed as an official thing, in Krakoa there's been a lot of interesting flirty signals between these two. While they've always been rivals, they have also just as often been colleagues and great friends. But in the Dawn of X relaunch via subtext we get some hints that there might be more going on here. In the new giant size Jean and Emma comic, these two both seem pretty pally while they're waiting for Jean and Emma to uncover what was wrong with Storm. They sat close together, shoulder to shoulder, smelling flowers, and while it seems like Jean and Scott are one big happy family right now on Krakoa in the newest X-Men series out of 2019, issue number 7, we see that Wolverine appears to be staying with the couple at the summer house. When Logan confides that he didn't sleep great to Scott, Scott responds saying that he understands what that is like for Logan, with all the hair and dealing with being both too hot and then too cold, with and without covers. As though he's shared a bed with Logan before. This is like a weird thing to know about someone. Then they talk about Logan potentially joining him and Jean and the kids on a vacation. While Logan seems excited at the prospect of Jean in a bikini, he also seems somewhat interested at the idea of Scott in a Speedo. Well, there's always been some weird love triangle involving these two and Jean. In Dawn of X, it seems ever more prominent. So I think they might be together in some kind of strange triad. I'm for it. I ship it. I like it. Number 2. Emma Frost and Jean Grey. Emma and Jean just recently had their giant size together, which by the way was one of the prettiest comics I have ever read. I know it's early, but there is already talk of it being considered one of the most beautiful comic issues out of this year. Shout out to Russell Dodderman for this amazing art, by the way. So alongside this comic being gorgeous, the story was also compelling, and in it we got hints of just where these two ladies might be at in their relationship. Jean and Emma have always been seen as opposites, and have spent a lot of time in the comics arguing over Scott. But even though they're opposite in a lot of ways, they're also similar in a lot of ways. And in Dawn of X it seems like they're ready to bury the hatchet, and maybe even all be in a relationship with Scott? Jean and Emma have some really intimate touches in their giant size, and have had some playful banter surrounding a compliment that Jean gives to Emma on her shoes. All in all, nothing is explicitly said here, but like with Logan and Scott, there is a lot of subtext between these two ladies. And I just feel like maybe there's something happening with them and Scott too? I don't know. And then like, do these two triangles overlap? Is it just one big circle? What's happening? I'm into it, what's going on? Number 1. Cable and X-23. In volume 2 of Fallen Angels, these two have been playing the flirting game pretty ferociously. And while kind of a weird pairing, I like them together. It's also kind of cute that they are both offspring of two other often rivals and kind of besties, Logan and Scott. It only makes their whole potential relationship cuter. These two are constantly watching out for one another, and when they join Psylocke's team of butterflies in Fallen Angels, Laura Kinney originally doesn't even want Nathan on the team. She's worried for his safety, revealing that she cares about him, although she pretends she's not interested in him. Just cute. I'd be interested to see the going-ons between these two off panel, because there's definitely some chemistry there. Number 10. Children of the Vault. The Children of the Vault are their own race who seek to rule the world. They are neither mutants nor humans, though they did evolve from the human race. The children are part of a race that descended from humans, having been technologically evolved over the course of 6,000 years. They believe only one race should rule Earth and plan on becoming said race. One of their members, Seraphina, recently resurfaced in the Dawn of X X-Men series, having escaped from Orcus, who had somehow captured her. Before Wolverine could catch her though, she returned to the vault, where she was also seen rejoining the other children. Number 9. Phalanx. So the Phalanx are kind of complex. If you're familiar with the Phalanx, it's probably because you are familiar with the Annihilation Conquest story arc from 2007 to 2008. The Phalanx work basically to destroy matter and upload it to a hive mind of data using the techno-organic virus, assimilating all organic and inorganic matter that they come across in the universe. So they're basically like the Technarchy, but the Phalanx share a collective mind, where the Technarchy are individuals. Phalanx aim to absorb all matter in the universe and eventually manage to threaten all of Earth and mutant kind respectively. It is only through Moira's regeneration abilities that we know the great risk this hive mind tech race could pose, and has posed to the X-Men and all of life before, in a previous one of Moira's lives. Number 8. The Supremacy. The Supremacy sought to take down and defeat the X-Men in an alternate future. We learn a bit more about them in Powers of X. They were the ones behind Nimrod the Lesser and eventually Nimrod the Greater, and their library of Homo sapiens and mutants alike. After years of breeding mutants in camps to use as their slaves and hounds to fight against their own kind who had revolted, they went a step further, literally dissolving mutants in tanks of femto fluid until they were reduced to nothing but the data that comprised them. Ugh. They would then be stored in a great library where the data that their corpses provided could be used to win the war against mutant kind. Eventually, the war became obsolete, however, making this whole process and the library that stored this data almost eerily useless, which is creepier. Don't put me in femto fluid, please. Number 7. Orcus. Orcus is a combination of a variety of government organizations, some more noble than others. The money and structure behind Orcus has been provided by such iconic organizations as AIM, SHIELD, and Strike primarily, with smaller investments belonging to organizations such as SWORD, Alpha Flight, Hammer, Armor, and even Hydra. The goal of Orcus is to protect humanity from growing global threats, which in this case involve mutants. Their plotting caused Professor X to create a task force to stop the creation of a mother mold, which he and Moira McTaggart believed would be the beginning of the end for mutants in regards to the Nimrod tech that the mother mold would produce. However, we later discovered in the new X-Men series that the work of scientist Alia Gregor, who is affiliated with Orcus, proves that this assumption may have actually been wrong, and that Nimrod tech may continue to be a threat to the X-Men even with the mother mold destroyed. Also, now Alia's got an even bigger hate on for the mutants and the X-Men after the death of her husband, which happened when the mutant team infiltrated the Orcus space station and destroyed the mother mold. Number 6. Chen Zhao. Chen Zhao is a very wealthy politician who was publicly humiliated by Kate Pride. Yeah, she's dropped Kitty and she's just going by Kate Pride now. And Bishop. She was humiliated when she attempted to blame mutants for her missing husband, who turned out had actually just joined a kind of cult of worshipping and celebrating mutants. So that's kinda awkward for her. Frustrated, she decided to make a very generous donation to anti-mutant organizations and aims to continue her own fight in the war against mutants. She donated to one very specific anti-mutant organization actually, which we'll talk about soon. Number 5. Xeno. Although the creation and unity we have seen from the mutants in the Dawn of X relaunch has allowed them to shut down those programs who would use mutants as test subjects and as a means to advance human evolution, that doesn't mean that the people behind those organizations just disappeared. In fact, it seems that instead the few people left who still believe in them have found one another and created a more secretive organization in the shadows known as Xeno. Xeno was the group behind the assassination of Charles Xavier in the X-Force series, and while X was successfully resurrected, Xeno still created quite a shiver of panic among the mutants of Krakoa. This organization will likely continue to pop up as an enemy to mutants and the X-Men throughout the relaunch, and they are ruthless, resourceful, and terrifying in their methods, successfully using the captured Domino's skin to ensure their assassinations team success. Ick. Graphic. Get it? Cause they graphed her skin? Ew. Gotta get that luck though, gotta just slap that luck skin onto ya. Number 4. Apoth. Apoth is the main antagonist of the new Fallen Angel series. While Apoth doesn't directly threaten all of mutant kind or all of X-Men, although at the end they kind of mentioned it like they would be threatening that, they definitely found a strong enemy with one member of the X-Men, Psylocke. Or well, a version of Psylocke anyways. With Braddock and Quanon both being discarded as names for her, Psylocke sets out to seek out her daughter, who had been taken from her years ago when she worked for the Hand. Yeah, apparently she has a secret daughter, that's a thing. And to find a villain called Apoth. Also, I think we can assume because of the whole hand thing that this Psylocke is Quanon, but she doesn't want us to call her Quanon, so we won't do that. It turns out that Apoth is a god who also kind of has an army of children at their disposal, and that they inhabit two sides of themselves, one light, one dark. Psylocke creates a team and works with Sinister to find and defeat Apoth for her own reasons, not knowing that in fact strings have also kind of been pulled in regards to this upcoming battle and why she's going to do it. Apoth is a powerful and psychic telepathic villain, but still proves to be no match for Psylocke. Number 3. Horticulture. I love these ladies so much. They are basically a villainous eco-terrorist version of the Golden Girls group. They are sassy, elderly women who used to work for corrupt and greedy biotech companies who did not care about the effects of their work in regards to the planet's well-being. As such, these women decided to fight back. They planted their own seeds within the companies, hoping to infiltrate them over time so that they could then have control of all plant life on Earth, deciding what grows and what doesn't. However, with Krakoa's miracle plants and resulting pharma drugs hitting the market as a result of the mutant nation being recognized globally, their plans were kind of threatened. Horticulture formed, and these 4 women, Opal, Lily, Augusta, and Edith, threatened the mutants and Krakoa. They attacked with a green sticky substance that appears to neutralize mutant powers, and vowed to either cause Krakoa to join them or they would cut them down like the weed they are. I sincerely hope we get to see a lot more of them, or that the mutants decide to team up with them because they're just hilarious and amazing. Number 2. Merc. Merc is a team and organization that was built out of the demilitarization that seems to have happened globally as a result of Krakoa being recognized as a nation. Call it a time of peace or call it an anxious time of reserved resources in preparation for the war to come, but regardless of the cause, Merc is comprised of former top paramilitary soldiers who seek out battle because, you know, they were kinda laid off, and as such have become guns for hire. They are loyal to no nation. They were originally employed by Xeno to fight against the X-Force and X-Men, but may have also more recently been approached by the mutants themselves in regards to their services. So we'll have to wait and see. They were fighting against them, but maybe they can be used. Number 1. Hominis Verendi. While the Marauders might operate separately from the X-Men, they are still comprised of a lot of former and current X-Men members, including one of the original team members, Bobby Drake, and it also includes Storm! Yay! This team is led by Captain Kate and ends up going up against the anti-mutant organization Hominis Verendi, which is comprised of former Inner Circle members of the Hellfire Club. Sort of. Also, can we just acknowledge how great the Hellfire Trading Company is though? Separate of course from Hominis Verendi, but still, they're really cool and I just had to shout them out because yeah, they're really fun. Hominis Verendi were previously known as the unofficial Hellfire Brats and were originally part of the Hellfire Academy. The team also has their own White Queen, Black King, and the like, similar to Krakoa's Quiet Council and the former Hellfire Club. But of course, they're all kids. They're all little non-mutant kids who just want to hate on mutants. Evil children, evil children.
And at number 10, Karma. Karma is a character who first appeared in Marvel Team-Up issue 100 back in 1980. She came from Vietnam, having fled the country with her family during the war. She was one of the founding members of the New Mutants. Now Karma has powerful psionic abilities that allow her to physically possess others, meaning she can take possession of the minds of humans or animals. This occurs by Karma projecting a psionic energy surge that overwhelms their consciousness and renders her victim unconscious, with Karma's own mind taking the wheel, so to speak. When Karma is in control, she can do some real damage, having the ability to alter her victim's memories, perceptions, reveal information to her, or have them fall asleep. She can even make their body work as if it were an extension of her own. But if she stays too long with a host, she risks her own personality becoming a subordinate to that host personality, becoming more and more like her victim. After an incursion with the Shadow King, Karma also gained the ability to mentally see through others' eyes, and she can protect herself from the psychic assault of others. Moving on to number 9, Joseph. Joseph, who only operates by a first name, is the clone of Magneto, but kind of sucks in comparison to him. This is why he's a bit baffling to some. He is a mutant clone who first appeared in Uncanny X-Men issue 327 from 1995, but he also died in a battle against the real Magneto and had a thing for Rogue really briefly. Now his abilities in theory should be the same as Magneto's if he's the iconic villain's clone, right? Well, that is not the case, hence why he's on this list. Sure, he is capable of generating powerful magnetic fields, but he can also generate electricity and electromagnetic radiation. And the real kicker? Well, he doesn't have the full range of Magneto's powers. He never demonstrated the same extent of those powers or some of the tricks that Magneto has been able to pull off over the years, like producing a wormhole. He lacks the mental barriers Magneto has, and therefore when he manipulates a ton of energy, he often causes damage to himself. Sucks for you, Joseph no last name. Moving on to number 8, Husk. Many people might assume that Husk has shapeshifting abilities, but that is not the case. The character who first appeared in ROM Annual Issue 3 in 1984 has the ability to remove one layer of skin, or husk if you will, which then reveals a different layer of skin made out of an entirely different composition. So essentially, she sheds one layer of skin, and the layer of epidermis beneath can be something the likes of metal or stone or something entirely different. She's a metamorph who has made her skin into glass, wood, rubber, diamond, granite, brick, and even adamantium in the past. This can increase her weight, strength, or invulnerability in the process depending on the material. So she becomes diamond, she becomes impervious to an extent. Rubber, she gets bouncy. She even once generated heat and flame and has even produced acidic skin. Now aside from being kinda gross, think of like all that dead skin she sheds, it's easy to see why some would mistake Husk for a shapeshifter. Although technically speaking she kind of is, but it's a weird process in which she does it, and very limited. Can just be her skin. And at number 7, Sage. Sage is a character who debuted back in 1980, appearing in the X-Men issue 132. And she has a variety of mental abilities that can often be a tad confusing. Think of Sage like a supercomputer. Her brain has unlimited storage capacity. She can recall anything at any time with perfect clarity, and the speed of her thoughts allows her to analyze her surroundings for data within seconds, almost instantaneously. She's like a back computer. In addition to that, she can calculate probability of events based on said data. Sage can multitask too, completing various actions all at once in her brain. And if that wasn't wild enough, she has perfect control over her body because of her superpowered mind, meaning she can recreate any physical actions that she's seen once, as long as they are within the parameters that her body is capable of. She can even see a person's genetic code and read their DNA, and selectively evolve existing genetic traits, which can tap into latent abilities, although she can't reverse the procedure, which has caused unpredictable side effects in the past. She is a walking, talking bat computer. Up next at 6, Lockheed. Lockheed is a literal dragon. Well, actually he is an alien dragon who was Kitty Pryde's longtime companion and a member of both the X-Men and Excalibur teams. First appearing in the Uncanny X-Men issue 166 from 1983, this little dude does a lot more than just your typical dragon stuff of flying and projecting fire. And he is also the size of a cat, which is kind of super adorable. Lockheed comes from a race of advanced dragon-like extraterrestrials who can travel through space via astral ships that transport their essence, which kinda seems absolutely absurd. Now because of his empath abilities, he is able to understand human speech despite not being able to speak it all that well, and is immune to telepathic probing. So he's not just a cat-sized dragon after all. Although, I mean, would you rather have a real dragon or a tiny dragon that was cat-sized? Personally, I would go for the cat-sized dragon. Much more manageable and, like, adorable too. And at 5, Revanche. Revanche, who debuted in 1993 in X-Men issue 17, is one of a few characters on this list whose powers are not only confusing, but so is their origin story. So Revanche's early appearances were plagued by continuity errors in Marvel's comics, thanks to one of her creators, Fabian Nicieza, failing to read Uncanny X-Men issue 255. In that issue, the character Psylocke is discovered on the shores of an island by the Hand, whereas in issue 22 of the second volume of X-Men, a handful of issues after Revanche's debut, her origin story contradicted the one in Uncanny X-Men, with the character having come to possess Psylocke's body. Confusing, right? Revanche was said to have been an intuitive empath prior to switching bodies with Psylocke, but after switching bodies she gained telepathic abilities and could psionically generate a blade, a Psyblade that she could use to force her way into other telepathic characters' minds. So essentially she is Psylocke but not Psylocke and used to be an empath and is just a big jumble of continuity errors. Yeah, no bueno. Up next, number 4, Zorn. Zorn is a confusing character to begin with. Is he his own dude? Is he Magneto? Does that mean Magneto can do a bunch of other stuff like manipulate gravity and turn his sun head into a black hole? Lots of questions, friends. So, for starters, Zorn is a dude who first showed up in New X-Men Annual 2001 as a Chinese mutant who had a star for a brain. That's why he wears his little helmet. He ended up becoming the subject of an incredibly confusing retcon, in which he was revealed to be Magneto, who had actually died in the Planet X storyline prior. It made little sense. Then it was revealed in Excalibur Volume 3 Issue 1 that Magneto never died at all, which meant Zorn wasn't actually Magneto, and that led to a whole confusing storyline that featured Zorn's brother, who was kinda like his twin, and overall it was just a big mess. Now that could largely be the reason why so many fans find Zorn and his abilities perplexing. But even when Zorn was revealed not to be Magneto after all, his brother shared very similar powers to him, and was technically the second Zorn, and there were a bunch of major differences. Rather than having a sun in his head that his helmet covered, his brother had a black hole there. I mean, similar but very, very different things. The original Zorn also had healing powers, electricity and magnetism generation and manipulation, the ability to teleport via time-space wormholes, gravity manipulation, telepathy, and was self-sustaining. So yeah, that's a whole lot of powers to cram into one dude who may or may not be Magneto, but probably wasn't. Baffling. Moving on to number 3, Dazzler. Dazzler is often one of the most ripped on mutant characters in the comics, thanks to her publication origins. Initially, Dazzler, aka Alison Blair, was commissioned by Casablanca Records in 1978 as an animated special multimedia cross-promotion called The Disco Queen. Casablanca would bail on the project thanks to financial concerns, but the Disco Queen would live on, first appearing in the Uncanny X-Men issue 130 in 1980 as Dazzler. Dazzler's abilities, which are yet another source of her history of mockery, include the power to convert sound into light beams of various forms and intensity. She is also a trained singer, actress, and dancer, and of course is a highly accomplished roller skater. No joke on that last one. Arguably, the sound conversion trick of hers is the most confusing. She takes sonic vibrations which reach her body and transduces them into light. She has a large range of frequencies that she can do this with all kinds of sound pressures regardless of complexity, dissonance, or randomness being changed and converted, meaning a song and the sound of a car skidding could both be converted into light. So, what do these light beams do? This is where it gets even a little bit more baffling. She can temporarily blind people by creating a pulse of light of several thousand watts. She can create a cascade of sparkling lights that messes with people's equilibrium. She can create a strobe effect, which is no good for people who have epilepsy, and she can create rays of light that use patterns to produce trance-like effects in her victims. Dazzler can generate enough ultraviolet light to melt large metal objects. She can even use those light rays to create holograms and has used light energy to generate flight, which I don't quite understand, but that's okay. The more you know. And at number 2, Maggot. Maggot is a character that we've discussed a handful of times on our channel thanks to his absurd abilities. He has a slug-based digestive system. Oh, and he also is psychometric. Now, first appearing in Uncanny X-Men issue 345 from 1997, Maggot is a fellow whose digestive system is quite unique. Where his intestines should be, he has a hollow cavity that's home to a pair of semi-sentient slugs, or maggots, hence the name. He's named those slugs Eenie and Meanie. Eenie and Meanie can burrow themselves out of his torso, and at super fast speeds, they attack a foe or object with a powerful enzyme, which then processes and digests said object, or person. From there, they come back to Maggot, crawl back into his hollow cavity, and then transmit the food energy they collected to him, which then can supercharge him and allow him to do a variety of things like increase his strength, physical size, his sturdiness, stamina, etc. If the slugs don't re-enter his belly, this process does not work. And in the past, he's actually lost one of his slugs too. He doesn't get another one. He's left with one slug, which means I guess half of the abilities of digestive power with one slug. And finally, in at number 1, Darwin. Darwin is a peculiar character. First appearing in 2006, X-Men Deadly Genesis issue 2, he's a mutant who has reactive evolution powers. When he was first born, his mother practically disowned him because of his abilities, and later he was experimented on by scientists until Moira McTaggart recruited him. So what does reactive evolution mean in Darwin's case? Well, his body automatically adapted to his environment or circumstances, which allows him to survive anything, although the extent of that capability has never been fully defined in the comics. Now in the past, he's gained night vision in the dark, he's grown gills when in water, he became fireproof when his skin was exposed to an open flame. But it's not just basic physical transformations with him. He once converted his entire body into pure energy. He has increased his own intelligence. He morphed into a sponge when he was shot at with a weapon meant to destroy one's nervous system. He has learned different languages by merely looking at them. And when facing off against the Hulk, his body teleported him away from the battle. That last bit is interesting because Darwin doesn't have a choice over how his body reacts. While he may have chosen to increase his strength when fighting against the likes of the Hulk, his body sensed the best means of survival was to teleport him away from the battle. His body is even proven to process alcohol faster when drinking, preventing him from getting drunk. It's a tough life for Darwin.
In at number 10, Deadpool.
There's gotta be some way to die. I just need to die harder. Trademark Fox. Y'all caught up now?
Now, while it's still disputed as to whether or not Deadpool is an official member of the X-Men, but his involvement with Colossus and the fact that he's actually stayed at Xavier's school is enough for us to include him on this list. With a healing factor that would make Wolverine jealous, Deadpool puts his immortality to full use in not only the films but the comic books as well. Aside from the multiple suicide attempts, Deadpool has been the victim of decapitation and dismemberment several times. People such as Carnage, the Hulk, and even Wolverine have all done their best to separate the merc from his mouth. The story of how Deadpool gained his immortality is really interesting though. When Thanos discovers that Wade is in love with the literal personification of death, Thanos curses Deadpool with the inability to die, just so the two can't be together. Thanos was so jealous of Deadpool he accidentally made him immortal. In at number 9, Archangel. The story of Warren Worthington coming back is a little bit of a strange one, but regardless it's an X-Men death and rebirth, just not the rebirth that we were expecting per se. In the storyline, when the Archangel personality takes over Warren and actually attempts to take over the role of Apocalypse, the rest of the X-Force gets pretty worried, and rightfully so I should add. Anyone who wants to become Apocalypse should be watched closely, but a threat like that for the X-Force meant they needed to terminate Warren. And at the end of it all, it's Psylocke who delivers the execution by stabbing Warren with the life seed. Ultimately, this kills the Archangel, although not for long. As the team is retreating, they spot Warren trudging through the deep snow, except now he's been returned to his original form. However, it's not the same old Warren by a long stretch. This version was almost a blank slate. When he was stabbed with the life seed, it completely erased everything that Warren knew before his death. Later on, this more pure version of Warren is merged again with the Archangel clone, which may be seen as a technicality for some, but for us it's pretty much a resurrection of the original. In at number 8, Nightcrawler. Kurt Wagner's story of rebirth is really touching and speaks to the genuine character that Nightcrawler is. During the Second Coming storyline, Nightcrawler and Rogue were alone fighting against Bastion. Both of their intentions were to protect Hope Summers from the Super Sentinel, and as such they laid it all on the line. When Rogue went down, Kurt attempted to teleport her to safety, yet in the moment that he was about to do that, Bastion stuck his hand through Nightcrawler. So when they arrived on Utopia, he just had Bastion's hand sticking out of his chest and as a result slowly died from his injuries. But when Nightcrawler's soul rose to the heavens, he still continued his good deeds, helping them drive out evil whenever it reared its ugly head in the oasis of heaven. When Kurt's father chose to abuse their connection to attack heaven, Kurt took the opportunity to rematerialize his body back to Earth. But as a result, he had to turn over his own soul. Sure, he was able to return to the land of the living, but now he will never be able to return to heaven. In at number 7, Gambit. Gambit has always been one of my favorite X-Men characters, and therefore I was as happy as can be to mention that the Raging Cajun just won't stay down. In the 2012 17-issue Gambit Solo, the finale saw Gambit perfectly pulling off a prison riot which brought together not only his target, but the British intelligence MI13 and the Uncanny Avengers. As you can imagine, these groups coming together created quite the mess, and while his friends were picking up after him, the heroes actually lost track of the mob boss. The target ended up getting his hands on a gun and delivered a fatal shot to the head of Gambit. With Gambit now lying dead in the arms of Rogue, a member of the MI13 used the magic of Excalibur to reconstruct Gambit's blown apart head, which ended up bringing Gambit back to life and offered up a terrific line of dialogue where Gambit says, "Why do I feel like the day after Mardi Gras?" That's what Mardi Gras feels like. I don't want to go. In at number 6, Jubilee. Jubilee's death and rebirth stories are perhaps some of the coolest storylines out there. Her storylines have seen the hero die more often than the rest of the X-Men characters, but the first was perhaps the most unforgettable. After the House of M, Jubilee and many of the other X-Men had their powers basically turned off as they were captured by the Purifiers. Without their powers, they became easy targets for their enemies. The Purifiers beat them relentlessly and ended up crucifying them on the front lawn of the X Mansion. Talk about a grudge. By the time that help arrived, they were all essentially dead. However, when Wolverine carried Jubilee to the sub-basement of the X Mansion and gave her a blood transfusion from Angel, the restorative properties of the blood brought life back into her. In at number 5, Rogue. After the events of Avengers vs. X-Men, Rogue fully believed that the Scarlet Witch was going to cast another spell, so she decided to take care of it herself. To do this, she absorbed Wolverine's powers and ran through the Avenger with her new bone claws. Although what she didn't see coming was supervillain the Grim Reaper sneaking up behind her and stabbing Rogue in the back. Her death, while lasting for a few months, was eventually reversed when the Avengers went back in time to stop her first attack on the Scarlet Witch. Classic Avengers just turning back the clocks whenever they don't like when something plays out. Either way, it brought Rogue back into our lives, so I guess it's cool. In at number 4, Colossus. The story of Colossus dying and then coming back to life is every bit tragic as it is remarkable. When Peter's brother died, he felt it was his duty to find the cure for the legacy virus. Although the only way to make the cure airborne was to have the cure injected into a living person for whom it would ultimately kill. Colossus though decided this was a sacrifice that he needed to make and chose to inject himself with the cure. This is also the moment that Colossus went from looking human to altering his state into that steel form that we saw him as in the Deadpool films. Years after the run of Astonishing X-Men, a cure of the mutant disease was being developed, but all the X-Men knew was that it was being tested on an unknown subject. When the X-Men arrive to investigate, they soon find out that Colossus has been alive this whole time. He was being held against his will in an underground bunker, and a clone had been put in his place, which would be easy to do if you look like a robot. In at number 3, Cyclops. Scott Summers has actually died twice, but the first was more so the end of the life that he had known up until that point. Allow me to elaborate. During the 12 storyline, Cyclops had become a host for Apocalypse. Apocalypse at it again. And after being freed by the tyrant, Cyclops believed he was dead from the whole thing. But it was only that part of him that had died. Thankfully, Jean and Cable were able to remove Apocalypse from their friend to restore him back to his normal state. Well, as normal as can be. In the second death of Cyclops, we have to jump to Secret Wars 2. These strange mist clouds at the time were kind of floating around, and they were there to sterilize and ultimately kill the mutants all around the world. And one of its victims was Scott Summers. In a recent time travel storyline though, a younger version of his son Cable used a pinch of the Phoenix Force to turn the tides on Cyclops' fate. This ultimately resurrected his father and allowed him to crawl out of his grave. In at number 2, Jean Grey. The death of our beloved Jean Grey has been teased several times throughout the comic books. It gives us a heart attack every single time. But the real death came at the hands of a Magneto clone. A former X-Man himself actually poisoned Jean with a hefty dose of electromagnetism. Although because Jean had fully merged with the Phoenix Force, she was able to bring herself back several times. One of the more important cases of this remanifestation was in the Avengers vs. X-Men storylines. Jean returns to save a power-hungry Cyclops from perishing and also finally makes her full return using the Phoenix Force. However, in the end, she decides to reject this cosmic force and live the rest of her life without it. Lastly, on our number 1 spot, Wolverine. As I mentioned before, Wolverine has some pretty crazy regenerative abilities, but when the miniseries titled Death of Wolverine was released, we all feared his abilities wouldn't be enough this time around. In the miniseries, Logan's healing properties were weakened by a virus, and word of his now diminished state spread rampant throughout the villain community and essentially put a big target on his hairy back. After discovering who was responsible for the virus, Wolverine was covered in this molten adamantium, and as the metal hardened, poor Logan ended up suffocating to death. Although other versions of him remained, this particular Wolverine was resurrected with the help of an Infinity Stone. In the hunt for Wolverine, a group of Reavers track down Logan's body, and what they find though is just the hardened shell of Logan with nothing inside. You see, the X-Men were able to extract his body from the statue using Kitty Pryde's phasing powers. His body was actually buried somewhere else, but we soon saw him alive and well holding the Space Stone for some reason. Little to no explanation as to how exactly he crawled out of the grave, but nonetheless we're happy to see him again.
Number 10. Troll. The series Youngblood from Image Comics is definitely trolling us with this one. Youngblood is a series about a government-run and endorsed team of superheroes. It explores the idea of a world where superheroes garner celebrity-like status, similar to the series The Boys and Ecstatics. The team even includes Vogue, a Russian model who later uses her fame to create a makeup line. Troll is a member who is beast-like in appearance, covered in muscles. Upon seeing him in his true form, one would immediately be forced to call to mind Beast from Marvel's X-Men crew. Because get this, Troll normally is covered in blue fur. Yeah. Though admittedly, he is often seen without it as he shaves his entire body to appear more human. As his name suggests, an actual troll. While also agile and physically strong like Beast, he does not appear to hold the same level of intelligence. Though he once wielded a terrifying weapon, a book that could be used to rewrite one's own history and can tell the future, he lost it in a card game. Wah wah. Someone smaller but just as fierce as the Beast, but with less intellect, sounds pretty scary and dangerous to me. Number 9. House of X and Powers of X. These two new comic series retcon and relaunch X-Men history, and although they operate within the world of Marvel and the world of X-Men themselves, I feel as though they are important to mention. When we talk about comics inspiring people, it is important that we also recognize some of those who were inspired are fortunate enough to do the writing and illustration within the realm of the world that inspired them. How cool is that? When we turn to these new Marvel series, we see at the writing helm Jonathan Hickman, who has brought us a much more daring story when it comes to the familiar motley crew that is the mutant heroes. In fact, he has even reintroduced some heroes that we may have forgotten. The time in which mutants fight for their rights, freedoms, and even for isolation on Krakoa is painted as much more desperate and bleak. Part of this is the beautiful artwork and colors created in combination by R.B. Silva, Pepe Larraz, and Marta Gracia. The writing builds up the high stakes, and if you want to feel that tension and see how ruthless these mutants can get, check out House of X's issue number 2. Number 8. Steeljack. Astro City has changed publishers so many times, I'd rather not list them all. Instead, I'll just say the series is currently listed as belonging to Vertigo Comics. More of a concrete jungle vibe, in this series we have different factions or gangs of heroes in the city. The most similar one to the X-Men being the Astro City Irregulars. Among the characters of the series we find Steeljack, a wannabe superhero who acquired the power of metal skin. Sound familiar? Steeljack is like a permanent metal version of Colossus. Originally this character was actually a villain in the series. I don't know about you, but I would not want to deal with a villainous version of Colossus in any form. Number 7. Sarah Rainmaker. Coming to us from Wildstorm Comics, now owned by DC, is a Storm-inspired hero. Let's spread some of that Storm love. In the Gen 13 series, Sarah Rainmaker is introduced as one of a group of Gen active teens, think mutants, who are invited to participate in government testing. The group is kept in a prison-like testing facility before they escape. Sounds like some creepy X-Men gone wrong scenario where they get successfully rounded up by the government. Sarah Rainmaker's abilities allow her to control weather, only so far as air and water, though she can also fly and create lightning. So we're looking at a character who isn't quite on Storm's power level, but definitely has similar abilities. Other interesting facts are that Sarah Rainmaker identifies as a lesbian, and that her character was originally introduced as a member of the Native American Apache tribe. Number 6. Allison Hargreaves. Coming to us from Dark Horse's Umbrella Academy comic series, which now also has a Netflix show, we have Allison Hargreaves, also known as the Rumor. This story is definitely a much stranger and darker one than X-Men, in terms of the moods and vibes, and was written and created by Gerard Way, lead singer of My Chemical Romance. This connection is a little more loose than some of the others, especially if we are looking for a huge correlation in appearance. However, when it comes to powers and personality, the connection is a strong one, as Allison resembles that of another famed X-Men and Avenger and one of my favorite superheroes, Scarlet Witch. That is to say, Allison's powers are that she can alter reality, not using chaos magic per se, but by using the phrase, "I heard a rumor." Anything spoken after those words by her that is untrue ultimately becomes true. Scarlet Witch has also famously spoken aloud some of her changes to reality, only to have them come true, though her wishes are not as connected to the need to speak as Allison's are. Beyond that, Allison is also prone to fits of hysteria and emotional outbursts, echoing that of Wanda's struggle with her emotions and her mental health. Number 5. Toyo Harada. One could compare Toyo Harada of Valiant Comics' Harbinger series to Professor Charles Xavier, save that he is evil. Toyo is one of the most powerful psionics in the world. Again, psionics are kinda like mutants. His powers echo that of Professor X, namely that he is an insanely powerful telepath who also has the ability to control minds, but who also possesses the powers of telekinesis. His goal is to recruit others with superpowers and take over the world so that he can protect it and guide humans into the next step towards their evolution. Yeah, spooky. Number 4. Ripclaw. A combination of Warpath and Wolverine, Ripclaw comes to us from Image Comics' Cyberforce team and series. His origin story resembles a horror story and echoes some of Wolverine's origins, which, let's be honest, all of Wolverine's origin story are pretty much terrifying in and of themselves. Namely, when Ripclaw's mystical Apache powers garnered him some attention from the Cyberdata Corporation, they used him to do their bidding as their agent, after brainwashing him and giving him cybernetic enhancements. Ripclaw is also a member of the Native American Apache tribe, like X-Men's Warpath, and oddly enough, also like our number 7, Sarah Rainmaker. He was granted mystic abilities by the spirits of his ancestors to take on animal-like abilities. Similar but different than Warpath's Apache shaman spirit abilities, which he used to defeat the Demon Bear. His long black hair and red accents on his outfit also leave him looking similar to Warpath. Number 3. Silver Banshee. What happens when DC maybe gets a little inspiration from Marvel's X-Men member Banshee? We get Silver Banshee, who I actually think is an even cooler character. These two characters are similar in name and abilities only though. Both have supersonic deafening abilities, though Banshee tends to operate on the lower frequency, while Silver Banshee is perceived as operating on a higher frequency. And her sonic death cry is more deadly. If she can see you and knows your name and you hear her, you are dead. Though their names are also quite similar, Silver Banshee is known for being a villain in the DC world, where Banshee, though controlled by villains before, is usually a good guy. While Banshee is also male, while Silver Banshee is female, he did have a daughter who also had similar powers, who went by the name of Siren, before taking up her father's old mantle, Banshee. Though she has never explicitly been an X-Men member, she was one of the original X-Force members. Number 2. Cyblade. Also coming to us from the Cyberforce crew, we have Cyblade, who looks very similar to X-Men's Psylocke. Although Cyblade's powers are described as being electromagnetic while Psylocke's are described as being telekinetic, the fact remains that both can use their powers to create weapons, with which they use to fight. While Cyblade is known for her electromagnetic daggers, Psylocke is more famously known for her telekinetic katana, among other weapons. And if you don't think there is some kind of crazy connection between these two heroes, then just look at them side by side. I mean, it's hard to ignore the visual similarities here. And while Psylocke's origin story is pretty frightening, I mean, so is Cyblade's, so ugh. Number 1. Lobo. Lobo actually comes to us from DC, and is stated as being created in an attempt to poke fun at violent and gritty heroes, like Wolverine. What? So there you go. One could argue that he is an even more violent rendition of Logan, as Lobo was also inspired by Marvel's Punisher. He is fond of cigars just like Wolverine and shares some abilities, namely that he is known for being super durable and possesses accelerating healing abilities. He also has a heightened sense of smell, which he often uses as a bounty hunter to help track his bounties. Oddly enough, Image and Marvel have even created parodies of him? A parody of a parody. Wow, go figure.